Okay, we're back, and hopefully you had some time to think about whether you want to do a Rhodes square or a Rhodes heart in the center of your piece. You can see if you do the heart, you can leave this area blank, which is what's shown on the photograph of the original, or you can fill it in with basket weave or some variation of basket weave, which I did here, and I filled in all the little blank spots there on that heart. So because I did a heart on this one, I'm going to do a square on my other one. And that's the first stitch that we're going to do in the center of this piece. And then from there, you're going to work out and you're going to stitch all those stitches that you just learned. The one I haven't shown you yet is the knitted braid stitch. And I will show you that at the end of this video. So you'll have a chance to do the knitted braid, or you can do a long arm cross. And then in the corner, is just a big cross stitch. So you've got 4 corners there to fill in. This is the one that I've been using, I mentioned before, to teach class with. So you can see I was almost done with this one. Now, you can see I kind of crumpled it up a little bit, which is okay, because most of you are going to make a scissor pocket out of this, or you can frame it if you want. But you all have an extra piece of canvas so that you can do a back to make a scissor pocket. Now, we're not to the back yet, but I would suggest on the back, you don't want to do basket weave on the back, although I've had some students do that, but because it takes a long time, which you could. It would get you good at basket weave. I had one student who's local who kind of drew a vine and did a vine on the back, which was really pretty. What I'm going to do with mine is just I'm going to alternate these Scotch squares and these waffle stitches. I really enjoy doing this waffle stitch. So I'm probably just going to do the whole back, kind of the same as the front, except instead of this big centerpiece with a square, I'll have 4 more of these smaller squares in there, which I really love. So let's get started. The first thing you need to know how to do is find the center of your piece. Now you've got lots of, canvas here, because you all have, a pretty big piece of canvas. You've got a big enough piece of canvas, you could actually do 2 on one. And so if you're comfortable with that and you want to get your front and your back on one piece, just scoot over here to the edge, because when we're done with this, we're going to cut this off, within one thread right through there to whip stitch it together on 3 sides, and we'll leave the top side kind of open. So, if you feel comfortable with stitching on the edge, then scoot over to the edge, leave yourself, 4 or 5 canvas threads, and you can start on the edge, or you can start in the middle. I'm going to show you how to start in the middle. So, we're not using stretcher bars for this. We are just stitching in hand, and to find the middle, you just kind of crease it. Don't make a real hard crease, but you do it just kind of like you do your linen fabric. And I know some of you are cringing because we're creasing it, but remember, we're stitching full coverage on this thing, and that's the center right there. And then we are going to finish it into something utilitarian. We're not framing it. If you think you might want to frame it, then don't put the crease in it. Just kind of eyeball the center. You've got lots of room, so you'll be fine. Okay, so I have found the center, and I'm going to do this Rhodes square. Now, let's take another look at your instructions. So you've got this stitch diagram for basket weave, which we learned the first day. Now, you'll notice on the stitch diagram, not sure if you can see the starting point here because my camera's pretty close. It starts up at the top, which is traditional for basket weave, and comes down. I started at the bottom and went up, which is fine. It works either way. I covered a vertical thread first, which is also traditional. So you might want to, you can start at either end. It doesn't really matter. But your diagram does start at the top, whereas when I showed you, I started at the bottom. You've got the download for the boxed heart, which, is courtesy of Stitch Play Designs, which is Carol Lake and Michael Boren. This is one of their pieces. So you should have this with you. And you can download all these off of the YonderWays page on the website. If you haven't found them yet, go to Sassy Stitchery and then go to YonderWays and you can download them all. This is the diagram for the Rhodes square. So you've got this. This is exactly how you would do the Rhodes square with the right coverage. You start in the corner. Remember, we did that. And then you've got 2 more on here. You've got the long arm cross down here in the corner, and you've got the knitted braid. And so I'll show you those when we get to the end. this is the one you want to look at right now, which is your full scale diagram of where the placement is here. Now you can sort of see, you can see that this heart is here in the center, and then you've got your waffle stitches and your Scotch stitches coming off of that. The center point that I just found is where this little circle is. It's the point of the heart. All right. So if you're going to start with your heart in the center, you need to find number 1. So you need to count. Remember, we're counting threads and not holes. So you're going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threads. And then you're going to count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 threads. You're going to skip 10 threads going up. So you're going to count over 8. Let's do it again from the center point. 1, and you're counting threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threads. Then you want to start counting up, and you're going to be on the left-hand side of that last thread that you counted because you're counting over threads. So you're going to count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 threads. And you're above that last thread that you just counted. Now, if you're off a thread or so, or a thread, canvas thread, if you're off a thread or so, it won't matter because you've got lots of room. But you're going to come up here at 1 to do the heart. And if you remember when you did the heart, you came up at 1 and you went down at 2. All right, you came up at 3, you went down at 4, up at 5, down at 6, and you just work your way around this diagram. But this is your center right here where 39, 41, 43 is, over 8 threads, and then count up to find number 1. Okay, that's for the heart. And that's exactly where you start, in the middle, you know. Find the center, which is equivalent to here, over and up. Okay? Now, if you're going to do the square in the center, let's think about that. So the center of the square is right here. So you're going to count over 8 threads because you're going to be starting at 1. So from your center point that you found on this canvas, you're going to count over to the left 8 threads. Okay? I think 50 is the center, or right here somewhere. Yeah, so 50 on this road square denotes your center. Okay, but wherever your center point is on the canvas, you count over 8 threads. So find your center point if you want to do the road square and count over 8 threads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You're going to come up at 1 and down at 2 up here in the corner. Okay? All right. Makes sense? And then you're going to follow your diagram around just like you did before. It's a super easy thing. Let's rock and roll. How about it? I'm going to get started with you, and we're going to do I'm going to do the square. You may be doing the heart, and then we're going to figure out where to go next. And then I'm going to leave you to fill all those in because you've already practiced all the stitches. Okay? I'm going to start with an away knot again. You can start with an L stitch if you know how to do that, or a pin stitch. For me, I'm going to do an away knot, waist away knot, actually. And then I'll run that thread under. Okay, so remember to find my center, I just kind of lightly folded the canvas, pinch the center there just a little bit. Don't make hard creases on the rest of the canvas. It won't matter too much, though, if you do. And that's my center. And it doesn't have to be exact, just something relatively close. I'm going to put my knot down here in the lower corner. I'm going to come up here to where I think the center is, which is right in here. Let's make that hole a little bit bigger so I can see it. All right, so my center hole is somewhere right in here. And again, it doesn't have to be spot on because I've got plenty of canvas. Right. And from there, I'm going to count over 8 threads because I'm doing the box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm coming up right there. All right. Now, for the box, so you've got your heart diagram, and you remember how to, count over and find where you need to go down for number 2. You're counting threads. If you didn't watch that lesson, you need to go back and watch that lesson. For the box, you're just going to follow through your diagram. But to find the corner for 2, you've got to count threads. And so I'm counting, it's twice the size of a regular box in this chart. It covers 16 threads. So I'm going to count up and over 16 threads. And I'm skipping threads, not holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I'm going to make that hole a little bit bigger. And I'm going to count. And I'm going to count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And it's that big hole I made. Now I'm going to count over to the right, 16. And if you wanted to go on the bottom and then come up, you can do that. It doesn't matter. You're just covering 16 square threads, okay? So skipped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay, I'm going to sink that thread and I'm going to count that again. And if you want to make the hole big and count it before you sink the thread, that's fine. This was the big hole I made before, and I've already counted going up twice. And I'm going to count coming over twice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And it is the hole I went down in. So that's the most important part about making the square or the heart is the first stitch. Just make sure that you've got that counted correctly, and then you're fine. Now I'm going to make my Rhodes square. And I'm just going to follow my diagram around, and if you're doing the heart, you just follow yours around. And I'm not going to count this out loud because you may be doing the heart, and I don't want to mess you up. And if you need to watch me start the heart, go back to that lesson and watch that, and then come back here. And if you need to watch how the square is done, go back to that lesson and watch that, and then come back here. Because if I count either one of these, it'll mess you guys up while you're stitching. But remember, the most important thing I said about the square was not to skip a hole and not to put 2 threads in a hole. And then after I told you that, I did mention that the first one I did exactly that. So I made it work, and you can't tell the difference. The heart's a little different. If you mess up on that heart, you can kind of see it. I've had lots of students who have made a mistake, and most of their hearts looked fine. A couple of them were kind of wonky looking, and they wanted to redo them. But I hope you guys are enjoying this. Now, I do need to caveat and tell you I'm not a professional needle point teacher by any means, but I'm a pretty good needle pointer. I'm a pretty good stitcher, and I have learned from some excellent people, and I just wanted to share what I know. So there's always probably a neat tip or trick that you might learn somewhere else. I think that's great. You need to always keep learn from people in your stitch group, different classes that you might take. Learn from your own mistakes too. That's the best lessons. So when you make a mistake, you're probably going to say a little word, or at least huff, because I always do. And that's okay. That's human. But don't throw it down and never pick it up again. Just, learn from that mistake. And if you need to take it out, take it out. If you don't have to take it out and you can make it look good and move along, because most of the people who look at your work, unless you're getting it professionally judged, and even then, honestly, some of them don't always know exactly what they're looking at. But, most people who look at your needlework are just enjoying the aesthetic effect of it. They're just enthralled by the dimension and the texture of it and the color of it, and the fact that you made it. or that another human made it. So, you know, don't get too crazy about tearing stuff out and trying to reach perfection, because this is art. And art is perfect when it evokes an emotion from another human, right? And it's especially great if it evokes the emotion you intended for it to. But as long as it, you know, creates some feeling in the person that views it, then it's successful. And honestly, needlework and its art is probably even more for you as the stitcher than it is for the person that looks at it, because there is a very calming, wonderful, healing feeling that comes from working with your hands and making something with your hands. And needlework in particular, I think, connects us back to the generations of women and men before us, boys and girls, that have done needlework. Okay, I'm turning a corner with my box. I don't know where you are in your heart, but, and if I hadn't already done the heart, I'd be doing the heart right now. And if you guys need me to start this with a heart, just post it in the comments and I'll come back and do another start with a heart. But I think that having watched the other lessons and watched how I just counted it out, that those of you who want to do the heart will find the right spot. And here's the thing, even if you don't, you've got such a big piece of canvas that as long as you follow your stitch diagram and you make that heart right, it doesn't really matter where you started. Your piece will be off to one side or the other, but that doesn't really matter because you're going to cut it out of this canvas anyway. So I'm probably going to have to rethread them. I'll make it on this thread. I don't think. Maybe. Maybe not. It might have something to do with that long waistway knot I did. Yeah. I am not going to make it. All right. So for me, I'm going to end my thread and start over. And this is pretty loose on the back, as you know from doing your others. So I'm going to weave it in and out a little bit, but I'm not going to pull real hard because I don't want to truly distort how this looks on the front. I just want to secure this thread. Okay. All right. Very pretty. You guys have been choosing some really beautiful threads for your little kits. I hope you're enjoying it. I know we tried not to get too caught up on the color of the thread, and you know, we just kind of ask you your favorite color and try to pick something close, and I hope you got one you like. Just remember, this is a practice piece. So okay, so now this, to start this thread, I'm going to run it under. Or tell you what I'm going to do. I need to be coming from the top to the bottom. So up here, I think I did this before with you. I'm going to do a little, I'm going to fit in a little tiny pin stitch, a little L stitch up here underneath where this thread's going to cover. And I'm going to do it from the top. So I'm going to leave a little tail, and I'm going to come from the bottom underneath. I'm going to cover one thread, and I'm going to try to pierce that thread of that tail. Try to go right through it. It's important when you're doing a pin stitch to pierce it. Okay. And then I'm going to come from the side. And if you're going to do one of these, make sure you're going to be able to cover it, that you're not going to see it. And I'm going to pierce it again. Okay. trying to hold this where you can see it. Okay, and then I'm going to clip off the tail. Now make sure you don't nick your other threads. Okay, and that, I'm going to tug it on the back, is not coming out. It's got a little whisker, but that's okay because it's going to be covered. All right, now we were traveling along the top and going to the bottom, so I'm going to pick back up right where I left off. And you can take your finger and you can move, you know, these long stitches to where you like the way they're laying. You know, we're not using a laying tool to do this because it's a single strand. You can, but you don't need to. You just, you know, make it look pretty. Okay. Got 2 more holes on the top, 2 more holes on the bottom. That's a real good sign. And if you don't, it's okay. As long as it looks good, you're okay. Just, you know, fit it in there. You do need to have this thing be 16 inches, 16 threads square, though, whether you're doing the heart or the box. That center section has to be 16 threads for it to fit into the design. So your heart's perfectly charted for you to make that happen, so you shouldn't have a problem with that. And this box you can fit right in. We made it 16 squares, so it's done. I think it's pretty. I like it a lot. So I'm going to end it. Now you can end in a pin stitch too, but you have to shift the threads along the front, and I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to weave it on the back. And I know that some of you might have a better way to end your thread. You should do what makes you feel good about how it looks and about how it's secure. Okay, so I didn't pull that too crazy hard, but I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to take care of my waist away knot because I need to not have that in my way going forward. I could stitch over it, but I don't want to, which means I'm going to unthread. And if you have trouble threading and unthreading, you can use your second needle if you haven't lost it yet. If you've lost it yet, I feel your pain. It happens. Or if you've lost it already, I mean. Okay. Alrighty. I'm going to run this one under 2. Just a little bit. Because he got stitched over, he's already pretty secure. Okay. So now, one thing we didn't do was show top and bottom. And you need to do that. So before you go any further, if you've got a heart, you know top and bottom, right? Because the pointy part's on the bottom, usually. If you don't have a heart, you get a little lost in these geometrics around top or bottom. Now, this is where some people would take and put a little Rhodes box or waffle stitch up in a corner, and they always pick the same corner, and so they know that that's their top or bottom. But so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a T up here in the upper left-hand corner, which is where I almost always do mine. Pick your point and stick with it. And I'm just going to, I'm actually going to pierce that thread, make it its own little pin stitch. When I see this T, I will know that that is the top. Okay? And it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. It just needs to be some kind of marker. You could do it with a pen if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Some kind of marker so that you know which side is the top. Okay, and because I did that as a pin stitch, I'm going to cut the tail off. Alrighty. I'm gonna cut the back off. I'm gonna leave it a little bit longer tail because it could come out from back there. All right, so now I know that while I'm stitching this, that is the top. Okay, and if you stitched your square and you're a little confused already as to what's the top and the bottom, the stitches that are coming down over the top toward the bottom, that's your bottom, right? And also, you know, you can sort of, it depends on where you started. I didn't, you know, I started kind of right in the center. You should be a little top heavy, like your square should be on the top half of your linen, but or your fabric, but it's kind of a big piece, so it's kind of hard to tell. So if you're stitching the square or the heart, I want you to do that first and finish that. And you don't really have to end your thread. I ended my thread because I needed to put a marker at the top. If you're watching the video and you've not stitched that yet, put your marker at the top first. And it doesn't matter which side, you just want to know where's the top on this thing. And that's something you should do with every geometric counted needlepoint design that you do. You need to know where the top is. So whatever you like the best aesthetically, if you like it on the upper right, put it on the upper right. If you like it on the upper left, put it on the upper left. But be consistent with it going forward so that your eye just automatically sees that and knows which way is up. And I know it sounds a little crazy, but the more of these you do, the more that you'll see that sometimes it's hard to tell. Okay, so if you've not started stitching yet, put that marker in first so that you know where the top is. If you have started stitching, go ahead and finish your center motif, either your heart or your square, and then don't end your thread. Come back to me and we'll talk about where to start your next stitch. Okay, we'll be right back. Okay, so hopefully you have finished your motif, your heart or your square, and some of you may have ended your thread to go up and do this thing, and some of you didn't. If you ended it, it's okay. You can, you know, weave underneath in just a minute, and you can start on your next square. If you didn't end it, we're going to talk about it. So if you did not end your thread and you just finished your heart, you are right here. You ended your heart right here at the pointy part of the heart. So if it were heart, you would be right here. That's where you're at with the heart. If you're with the square, you're over here in the corner. Okay? So you're either here or here. If you had to restart because you ended your thread and you jumped up and you did your little marker, you can start anywhere you want to, but let's assume that you ended your thread with your last stitch or that you didn't snip it off. So you haven't snipped off your thread and you're sitting right here or you're sitting over here. If you did the heart, I would start with this Scotch stitch and I would come up at 1 right here and go down at 2 up here. Come up at 1 here. I'm sorry, come up at 3 here and go down at 4, up at 5, down at 6. So you're just covering intersections. Remember how you did that Scotch stitch and you did a few of those. I would start right here. And so that means that, let's look at this one. That Scotch stitch starts right there. You've got that point of that heart coming down. The point of the heart comes down right here. So from the point of your heart, you're going to skip 1 thread, and that's where you come up at 1. Okay? So from here on out on this diagram, with the exception of the blank space underneath and around this heart, because you haven't done any basket weave yet, you're going to be reusing holes. You see how they're all coming in and out of the same hole down through here in the chart? So the first one you're not. You're in clean holes all the way around. But unless you did the square, and then you're going to be going into a dirty hole. So it all depends on what you did, right? But to figure out where to start with the heart, from the point of that heart, you come down 1 thread underneath it and you come up at 1. And then you're coming to the upper right. Come down 1 thread underneath that stitch, come to the upper right. And you just work that Scotch stitch just like we did before. Okay? If you did the square, you have finished up over here. And if you look back at your waffle stitch chart, the waffle stitch starts in the upper right hand corner. That's where number 1 is for that. So you're not at a good spot to just naturally start like you did the Scotch Stitch. So if you did the square, I would count up 8 threads and start this waffle stitch here that's right beside it. Or you can count over 8 threads and you can start the waffle stitch here, or you can start the Scotch Stitch. Okay? So for me, I kind of like going in a clockwise pattern. I don't know why. It's just the way I like to do it. So I did the square and I ended over here. I'm going to count over 8 threads and I'm going to start this waffle stitch. And I'm going to do this waffle stitch. And when I finish that waffle stitch, I am actually going to be back up in here. And from that point, I'm going to run underneath and I'm going to come over here and start this Scotch stitch, which means I'm going to be starting in a dirty hole. Okay? And I'm going to do the Scotch stitch, which means I'll end down here. And from there, you could jump down here and you could do this waffle stitch because then it's right in the perfect spot. And you could work yourself around, you know, at the most convenient way. For me, I'm probably going to run underneath, which there won't be an underneath. I'll probably just be jumping over. I won't end the thread if I don't have to. Remember, I'm going to cover it on the back, so it's not going to matter. Or you could, you know, come up here, or you could start right here. I mean, you find your own path through here. It doesn't really matter. You can find the most convenient path. And so if you end here, you could come right down here and start this next Scotch stitch. And then when you end here, you'll be ready to start this waffle stitch. When you end that waffle stitch, you'll be right here because it ends in the middle. So you'd still have to like come under and down somewhere. So no matter what you do with this, you really are going to have to jump some threads or run it under. And, you know, if you remember what the back looks like with the waffle stitch, so let's look at this one. So these are Scotch squares. And if you look at the back of them, they're fully covered. Okay. These are the waffle stitches here. If you look at the back of the waffle stitches, there's nothing in there. Nothing covered. So, you know, I leave it up to you whether you want to end the thread when you get to a point where you're not starting right next to something, to jump up here, and then you're going to have to do, you know, a pin stitch or an L stitch to start, or an away knot, and you're going to have to run it under. For me, I'm probably just going to carry the thread up there and keep stitching, because stuff that gets covered on needlepoint. As long as you're not, you know, distorting anything on the back and having a bunch of, you know, messes back there that adds dimension to the top that's not supposed to be there, then you're fine. On this waffle stitch, you know, you could probably end it and restart it with an L stitch that you bury under here somehow. You've seen me do that, like a pin stitch kind of L stitch. You know, so this is your first piece. I wouldn't obsess about it. You know, just kind of figure out the path you want to go through here and use this diagram and alternate these stitches and enjoy it. And don't worry about what the back looks like too much. It's your first piece. We are, you know, going to cover it with something anyway to make it into that scissor pocket. So it's going to be fine. So go ahead and work on this. You know, start stitching your square and get those waffle stitches and Scotch stitches done. And, you know, come back to me for the next lesson. We'll talk about what to do on the edge. And then in the lesson after that, we'll talk about actually finishing it and putting it together. But to put it together, you've got to stitch back for it. So you'll have to do this pattern again, which is great because it gives you some practice. So if you want to frame it, you don't have to do the second piece. You just need to finish this. So have fun with that. Go ahead and start your next stitch. Like I said, I'm going to, for mine, since I cut mine off, I'm probably going to run it under on this box on the back. And then I'm going to come over here And I'm going to start my waffle stitch because I actually like doing those waffle stitches. And remember when you're doing these waffle stitches, what I said about the very last stitch right here. You see how this, on the very last stitch, it tucks underneath. So remember that when you get to stitch number going from 27 to 28, as you come up at 27 and then you're going to go down at 28, slide underneath that stitch, that last stitch that you're going through, so that you continue the weave and go underneath and go down at 28 right there. Okay, so go ahead and start stitching. I'm going to work on mine. I might do a stitch with me for the back piece. So if you feel like you need some reinforcement and you want to watch me stitch and watch me move around, we will do that for the back section. So have fun with it. I'll see you back in a few minutes, maybe, or a few hours. It depends on how you do this. So see you soon.